Good morning, everybody. Appreciate everybody being here bright and early. Well, maybe not so bright. Let's see, 14, 15, 16. Who's down there? I can call on Representative Meeks if you'll open us up in a little word this morning.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Bow with me, please. Dear Heavenly Father, we just thank you for this day. We thank you for your many blessings in life. We thank you for the opportunity to be here to serve our state, dear God. And we just pray for guidance and grace as we go throughout the day to work to address the many needs of Georgians. Please be with our families at home and all of our friends that travel here today and take us home safely this evening. These are the blessings we ask in your name. Amen.
Thank you, Representative Meeks. All right, we're going to roll straight into this. I think we're going to have EPD come up first. For the committee, we're going to section 34, page 15.
Good morning, Chairman Wiedauer, members of the subcommittee. Our pleasure to be with you this morning. We had no changes in the amended budget, so this is our first time before the subcommittee this year. We're glad to be here. My name is Rick Dunn. I am the director of the Environmental Protection Division. Just a little background. EPD is the state agency charged with regulating the utilization of our air, water, and land resources. We implement about 24 statutes passed by this body. We also have full permitting and enforcement authority for all the major federal environmental laws, the Clean Air Act, Clean Water Act, Safe Drinking Water Act, RCRA, et cetera. We have a little over 700 employees. Many of those are located here on Capitol Hill. Kind of our enterprise administration is located over the Twin Towers, along with our water branch and our hazardous waste folks. We also have staff, the air staff and our solid waste staff are located at the Trade Port, which is an office park down near the airport. We also have 7 district offices located throughout the state, agricultural water permitting offices in Tifton and Dawson, as well as a lab in Peachtree Corners. Mr. Chairman, as you said, the EPD administers 3 programs in the Department of Natural Resources budget, section 34 of your tracking sheet, pages 15 and 16. Those are the Environmental Protection Program, which is 34.3, the Hazardous Waste Trust Fund, which is 34.5, and the Solid Waste Trust Fund, which is 34.8. For all 3 programs, the base budget there is $133 million in total funds. We have nearly 50 separate revenue sources, one of which is appropriated state funds. The state appropriated funds in the base budget is $48 million, or about 36% of our total. I'll go line by line on kind of the changes. 34.3.1 is the $2,000 COLA increase for full-time employees. Total cost to the agency for that increase will be $2.4 million. State funds provided here are almost $628,000. I will say, this is common for every agency, but retention and recruitment has been our largest challenge, particularly since the pandemic. Over the past 2 years, our turnover rate has been about 20% per year, which is about twice of our historic average. Almost all of our turnover can be attributed to pay. Mr. Chairman, as you know, over 85% of our employees are environmental specialists, engineers, geologists, modelers, lab scientists, et cetera. These are folks, particularly when the economy picks up and infrastructure investment picks up, environmental picks up as well. So it's not uncommon that these folks can get an alternative offer from EPD for 30 or 50% higher than what they're making working for the state. I will note that starting this fiscal year, we were able to invest about $8.3 million into the salaries of environmental professionals to kind of stem the turnover problem. And good news, for the first 6 months of this year, we experienced 61 kind of voluntary separations, which is about 25% less than the first 6 months of last year. Even more impressive, I think, is our vacancy rate, which the positions we're able to recruit for and fill. Our vacancy rate currently is about 7%. Last year at this time, it was 14%. So the investments in salaries have really had a big impact. Certainly our salary structure is not where it needs to be yet, but this $2,000 COLA will help tremendously. And so we're obviously very appreciative of that being in the governor's budget. Also included are two other statewide changes related to risk premiums, 34.3.2, and merit system assessments, 34.3.3. If you move down to the Hazardous Waste Trust Fund program, which is also on page 15, 34.5.1 is aligning the budget with fees collected from the 75-cent per ton tipping fee at landfills. HB 511 from 2021 dedicated these tipping fees to the Hazardous Waste Trust Fund. Last year, about $17.5 million in tipping fees were collected, and what you see is the budget modification. The increase of $9.9 million is just to align the base budget with FY22 collections. I do want to say, I mentioned this last year, I'll mention it now, and I'll probably have to mention it next year as well. We typically collect about $12 million in tipping fees. In FY21, fourth quarter tipping fees, a large number of those tipping fees came in after the close of the fiscal year, so they were credited to the next fiscal year. So that's why you see the big jump. It was low, $7 million we were missing, jumped up to 19. Next year, you'll see a cut back down to 12, and hopefully that stays consistent, somewhat consistent through time. I hope that makes sense. Similarly, if you go down to the Solid Waste Trust Fund program on page 16, 34.8.1, again, that's also to align budget with the fees collected, this time from the $1 tire replacement fees. Again, just like the tipping fees, these fees were dedicated by HB 511. Last year's collections were $7.66 million, which is $37,698 higher than the FY23 base, and that's just truing that up. We also have, I don't think it's on your tracking sheet, we have two items in the capital budget request, simply a roof replacement for our district office in Brunswick, as well as replacement of 13 vehicles, which is about 6% of our current fleet. Mr. Chairman, those are changes for BPD and the governor's budget, and I'll be happy to answer any questions on those or anything else.
I'll start with one for the benefit of the committee. You mentioned 20% turnover.
Right.
The size of your agency for everybody that doesn't understand what 20% means.
Yeah, so we have a little over 700 employees. So, but the way to think about it, and you can really see this in the number over 3 years, if you have 3 straight years of 20% employment, that's over half of your staff is brand new. And I will tell you, as a regulatory agency, we need people with experience, with knowledge and experience. It's very important to the regulated industry. It's very important to the citizens. And, of course, it's important to us to have folks who are knowledgeable and are able to execute on their responsibilities. And when you have that type of turnover, it's very, very difficult.
Appreciate that. Number 15, Representative Parsons, Chairman Parsons.
Thank you, Chairman. I wanted to ask you, I'm trying to recollect this about.
Sure.
On the fees that you get from the tires, and then the other one there,
Tipping fees.
tipping fees. So I assume that stays behind. That money goes out to local governments, if I'm not mistaken, based on their applications for the money to come to them, right?
Yeah, so both the trust funds are, of course, limited on what the monies can be expended for. So we collect the funds, remit them back to Treasury, and per HB 511, they're appropriated back out to the agency. So the Hazardous Waste Trust Fund, which is based upon the tipping fees,
Right.
Those funds support staff in the hazardous waste program, as well as cleaning up abandoned landfills.
And who administers that as far as the landfills, cleaning up landfill? Who that money goes, and who actually is overseeing?
So we have state contractors, if that's
Okay.
what you're asking, who do the
Yeah.
the proper closure of the landfills. The funds are administered by EPD.
Okay. I guess, and then
And the Solid Waste Trust Fund is probably what you're thinking. That also supports our recovery materials unit staff.
okay,
It also can support local governments to remediate environmental problems with their landfills,
Okay.
as well as recycling programs and solid waste programs from local
right.
governments.
And then my question, I guess I was trying to get to, then I'm assuming that the amount of money that comes in is always less than what the demand is to do these things that needs to be done with that money. Is that correct?
Obviously, we try to plan to, we have demand, particularly for the grant programs that exceed what we have available, yes.
Okay.
But we try to, as much as we can over time. Obviously, when it comes to abandoned landfills, we have to prioritize and address those. When it comes to abandoned sites and the hazardous site inventory, we can't do everything. That would
Right.
take lots of money. We prioritize and try to address those as well.
Okay. Thank you, appreciate
Uh-huh.
it.
Anyone else? Well, Director Dunn, I think, oh, we got one. Representative Prince, Chairman Prince.
Still representative. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And this is one of those anything else questions, not
Okay.
dealing with the budget. Do you guys have or help in any way with this soil impediment? I would say for like regulation or anything with the Department of Agriculture. I see the environmental protection piece, and I know everybody always talks about EPD.
Yes.
And what do
So-
you guys fit in that program?
So we regulate waste. So, applying waste to the ground or any place else, that's what we regulate. What we have less of a role in is what's called recovered materials, materials that are removed from the waste stream and put to some other productive use. A lot of these soil amendments have been certified as recovered materials, as soil amendments that are useful for the land. And again, as a recovered material, we don't play a role unless there are releases into waterways or things like that. Does that make sense? Okay. But we regulate the waste part. Recovered materials are not waste.
All right, Director Dunn, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right, moving on. DOAS, Ms. Sullivan, come on down. Maybe we're going to section 12, page 4.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, and Mr. Hartman. My name is Rebecca Sullivan, and I serve as the Commissioner of the Department of Administrative Services. Thank you very much for the invitation to speak to you today about the recommendations reflected in the FY24 budget for DOAS programs. I would like to acknowledge that Chief Judge Malahy of the Office of State Administrative Hearings, as well as Chief Judge Larry O'Neill, one of your former esteemed colleagues who now presides over the tax tribunal, are here today and are happy to speak to any changes or any questions you may have about their programs. The DOAS FY24 budget information is reflected in section 12, pages 4 through 6 of the tracking sheet. There are several recommended changes to our FY24 budget. Section 12.2.1 eliminates one-time funding from our base budget in the amount of $1.5 million to purchase annuities for wrongfully convicted individuals. Sections 12.3.1, 12.4.1, 0.5.1, 0.6.1, 0.7.1, and 0.8.1 pertain to the elimination of the state general funds provided for the $5,000 COLA in all DOAS programs. This is essentially removing those dollar amounts from the FY23 base budget. With the exception of the HRA program, DOAS can manage the cost of the COLA within our existing budget without cutting funds earmarked for other program initiatives. However, all DOAS employees will receive the COLA, and we are working with the budget office to ensure that the HRA program is adequately funded. Section 12.3.2 reduces funds in the amount of $482,000 for intergovernmental contracts. This relates to pass-through funding unrelated to DOAS programs. Section 12.5.2 increases funds by $770,000 to recognize additional revenue from merit system assessments to implement statewide recruitment and retention initiatives. This funding will allow DOAS to establish a new unit to assist agencies with the workforce challenges that are facing the state, as mentioned by Director Dunn just a few minutes ago. Section 12.6.2 relates to the DOAS risk management program, specifically the property program. This section would allow DOAS to increase billings for property insurance premiums to state entities in the amount of $30 million to cover the cost of excess insurance and claims expenses and ensure that we have adequate insurance coverage for the state's property and contents valued at $42.5 billion. Finally, section 12.12.1 eliminates one-time funds for the next-gen ERP cloud modernization project, which we presented to you last year. State Accounting Officer Geralda Hines is present, and we're happy to provide a brief update on this project at the appropriate time if it be the will of the committee. And those are, that's the end of our changes in FY24. I'm happy to take any questions.
Seeing none, I'll start with will be a common theme today for all you in the audience. Just be ready for it. Can you talk to your agency, the size, vacancies?
Yes, sir. We have
Turnover.
about 174 employees right now. We are recruiting for about 16 different positions. Our turnover has also increased with other agencies. We were about 17% for FY22.
Anyone else on the committee? Ms. Sullivan, I think you're getting off easy today.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Hines. Committee, we're going to section 11, page 2. State Accounting Office. Good morning.
Good morning.
How are you?
I'm doing well. Good morning, Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Geralda Hines, and thank you for having me here today to speak about the SAO FY24 budget recommendation. Most of the items are statewide adjustments where you'll see 11.1.1, 11.3.31, 11.51, or around the $2,000 COLA spread. The 11.1.2, 0.3.2, and 0.4.3 reflects the DOS insurance premiums, and 11.1.3 reflects adjustments to SAO's portion of the TeamWorks billing. So I'll point out some of the unique items. In our financial systems division, 11.2.1 eliminates state general funds of about $587,000, which was provided in the legislature in FY22 session for funding of the 5,000 COLA. We can absorb this reduction through the attrition and the use of existing funds, so we do agree with the recommendation. 11.2.2 reflects adjustments of about $1.9 million in total funds, and that's to assist in the cost of operating and maintaining our current ERP system, which is for financial and human capital management system, TeamWorks, which we are going to be replacing with the next-gen system. And these dollars, actually, this is the first time we've done billing in about 6 years. We bill other agencies for the use of the TeamWorks system, and it covers merit increases over the past years, ERS fringe rate increases, the 401 match escalation, the PeopleSoft maintenance and operation escalation, and our $5,000 COLA. The next item is one in the statewide reporting division, which is responsible for various reports, including our annual comprehensive financial report, and it's 11.4.3. It has been recommended that we use the existing funds for accounting and reporting software. We can absorb this cost, which is about $225,000 in that program. So if you have any questions, I can answer those questions as it relates to our budget, and if you have any questions regarding the Next Gen program, I can give you an update on that.
All right. Chairman Yurda.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Welcome this morning.
Thank you.
Glad to have you. Appreciate the job you do. You mentioned the TeamWorks system, and you're going to begin billing other agencies for that. Tell me what that does and how that operates.
So currently, we bill other agencies for the use of the TeamWorks system. We have over about 180 agencies and about 4,000 employees that use the system. And so for those particular agencies, we bill on a transactional basis for the use of the system each year.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm going to ask. Yeah, I would love an update on Next Gen. I think, we've talked a lot about that
Yes.
project, and would love to hear a little more about it, what we appropriated, maybe for the benefit of the committee. and how much that maybe has been dispersed and utilized at this point.
Okay, sure. And Commissioner Sullivan and I will tag team because she has a piece of this, but I'll start off. So the Next Gen project is to replace our current teamwork system. It's been in existence for over 20 years now, and so we're looking to get a new modern technology, which will provide us the opportunity to streamline and standardize the way we do business from agency to agencies. Currently, each agency has their own internal business processes, so we're going to be standardizing that across the board so that we can, when we get data, when we reflect the data, it's consistent from agency to agency. So one of the things about the current system and the reason why we're changing the system is highly customized, and it's a 25-year-old system. A lot of the workforce for that system is dwindling, so we're going to be replacing it with, again, a more modern technology. We have moved into the phase of selection, and also we have another phase that's coming up around our procurement, so I'll let Commissioner Sullivan speak to that, and I'll tell you a little bit more about the funding.
Thank you, Officer Hines. We have made progress since the last time we presented to you on this project last year. After much research and due diligence with the participation and assistance of many state agencies, a software supplier has been selected for Georgia's new cloud-based enterprise resource planning system. The state has recently executed a contract with Workday for the new ERP. The next step is to select a supplier for implementation, which will be a formal competitive solicitation. The Next Gen team is currently in the process of finalizing that RFP, which we plan to post in the coming weeks with the goal of awarding a contract for the system implementation by the end of this fiscal year. And then the plan will be to follow with implementation activities beginning in the first quarter of FY24. With regards to funds, DOAS has incurred about $217,000 worth of expenses and resources to assist us with this project, and have submitted those requests to reimbursement for GTA, which I understand they are processing now.
Okay, a little additional information around the funding. We are currently working with Georgia Technology Authority. Executive Shanzia Thomas is here also, and they provide oversight of the program. We have about $50 million in the budget currently. About $4.3 million of that from SAO has been encumbered. One of the biggest expenses is for one of our vendors that's doing process mapping. So what we're doing there is we're looking at all of the different agencies, understanding their current business processes to ensure when we implement the new system that we do not have any hurdles around anything that's unique within that agency. We also have about $280,000 that we've paid for a special attorney to actually help us with the contract negotiations, which went very well. About $464,000 around change management. As you can imagine, with over 100 some agencies, we have to make sure we inform those agencies and keep them updated on what's going on in the project and where we need them. We've had over probably 700 individuals participate in our different various workshops, which we do want to thank all of the different agencies that have participated, because we've had some 14 or so 3-hour-long sessions, workshops going on that they participated in. We also have about $180,000 for various softwares. So I can answer any other questions that you may have.
Again, for the benefit, if you could tell us a little more about how long is this process? Is this you're done in 6 months? Is this
No, currently we're looking at rolling out what we call the human capital module around January 2025. And then from there, about 3 to 6 months later, we're going to roll out the finance part of that system, and then optimization. So we're looking to have pretty much all of the system in place by 2027.
Thank you. Representative Stoner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just had a question specifically as it relates to, in several sections here, it says reflect an adjustment to agency premiums for Department of Administrative Services administered insurance programs. What is that specifically?
So those are the statewide adjustments that actually are billed out from the Department of Administrative Services for insurance premiums, for risk management, and
For our insurance programs.
Okay. The reason I asked that question, and I figured it was something like that, was the last time I was here, during the Great Recession in 2008, we had a situation where the legislature was not informed, by the way, including the Appropriations Committee, that the agency stopped paying their state health insurance benefit plan premiums, by the way. And I know that's probably not what this was. I just want to double check and make sure that's, obviously was not what was going on, because basically what ended up happening, we didn't know this for 2 years. That was a way that the governor's office saved a whole bunch of money, but didn't quite tell us how they were doing it. So that's the reason I asked that question.
Yes, no, sir, DOS does not have responsibility for
understand.
the state health benefit plan. We do bill the agencies consistently for all lines of insurance, including property. The reason for that adjustment to the property billings this year are because the billings have remained relatively flat for a long period of time, where costs of the program have increased, and that's resulted in a depletion of the fund. So this appropriation would keep that program in the black.
No, appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Chairman Parsons.
Oh, thank you. I just wanted to ask, thank you, Chairman. You had mentioned how much had been allocated for change management.
Yes,
How much was that?
the exact amount, 484,000.
I'm sorry?
464,000, I'm sorry, at this point.
Okay. And the system, I believe you said, would be going into service in early 2025, is that right?
January 2025, yes.
Okay. I mean, I was just curious. It seemed like a lot of money. I'm just curious about all that. Would all that be spent in 2024? But wait a minute. We're doing the 2024 fiscal year budget right now. Would all that be used during that budget, you think?
Well, no, it's probably going to carry over. So the biggest part of our cost that we have right now, the $50 million, is probably going to be our system implementer. And once we release that RFP and get the actual proposals back and we see what that cost is, then we'll know what the total figure will be.
Okay, thank you.
I see no more questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, I think we've been joined by Gabe Sterling. If you'd like to join us up here, Secretary of State's office, we're going to section 43, page 21.
Good morning, Chairman Wiedauer, members of the committee and staff. I appreciate you all dealing with my personal travel woes this morning as I attempt to be a good citizen and ride MARTA while I waited 24 minutes at the North Spring station this morning. I would have been here right on time had I been there about a minute and a half earlier. And first, I want to thank you all for your good consideration coming out of the amended 23 budget out of the gate. We appreciate the help and support for those one-time projects. If you go to page 21, section 43, I will note again, we are going into our fourth year in corporations having no state funds. We are 100% self-sustaining on that with expedite fees we use out of the corporations division. In each of these sections, we're going to have obviously the $2,000 COLA, which is reflected in the total of the program net gain. So in elections, you see an increase of $103,182. Next one is investigations. You'll see an increase of $117,403. That's in 43.3. And 43.4, you see a program net gain of $58,794. In professional licensing, we have two changes there. The COLA increase plus moving $185,000 from our PLB section for licensing over to the Pels Board, which I believe you're going to be seeing a presentation on next week, which is the professional engineers and landscape architects service, something or other, Pels, that's what they always call it. Then securities is a smaller one, so its program net gain in section 43.6 is $31,582. And the next three sections you're going to be hearing from next week, but they do reflect the COLA as well, and obviously the Pels Board getting their large amount. Now I do want it noted, we're moving $185,000 from PLB, and the governor's budget is putting in $1,027,000 to run the Pels Board. They represent about 13,000 out of our 555,000 licenses. There are gains to be kept by keeping licensing under one roof. I'll just This has been a decision that's made. We understand it. We support it. We're working with engineers. And I know many people want to go and leave and do their own thing. It is expensive. In Georgia, it costs the state $8.5 million to do licensing. In Alabama, it's over $30 million because they have a lot of independent boards that are quote-unquote self-funding. So we do have a lot of advantages, and we're doing good work for the taxpayer on that. Now, there were several items that were not included that we would like to have some consideration on. You've heard these items before. They didn't make it to the 23. The largest one being the $2.8 million for the corporation's IT build-out. We have an aging corporations licensing system. We don't want to be in a position of having a corporation's licensing or corporation's registration system failing on us and having to do a fire drill to replace it in the next year or two. And it is an older system. The escrow on it is not as clean as we would like, the escrow being the code, because the vendor on that system has been bought out 3 times since we've been in office, so it's been 4 years. And it's on, I'm spitballing here, 40 different computers from employees who have left and come back, and they went from single development teams for each one of their systems they built for us to what they call a unified development team with nobody on it who's ever was there at the beginning when they built our system out. We are looking to leverage what we've already done with the professional licensing board with a Salesforce-based solution where we've already built out the baseline architecture, and we can use the same organization as that. So that will give us a cost savings as well, which is why the $2.8 million is lower than what we saw for the PLB build-out. It's a less complicated build-out as well. So we would appreciate that, and that can be bonded as it is a capital project. Another item in there was the $550,000 we need for the Verizon data plan. That is necessary for the poll pads to function as they are intended. We have upgraded them, and now we have a situation where there was about 40 counties that piloted them during the general election, and it was a very big success. And part of the reason it wasn't in the initial ask through OPB and through the budget process is we were piloting them after the time period when most of the OPB stuff gets closed out, which is October, which is why this is a late ask. But it is necessary. It does speed up check-in, especially in the early voting process, which we saw. That was the one section we still have some lines in. And the counties that used the cellular connected poll pads for their check-in devices for early voting went from an average of about 1:50 on check-in to about 46 seconds because it's a one-step process instead of a two-step process. So when we saw those lines in Fulton and DeKalb and Cobb and Clayton and Gwinnett, those would get reduced by using these things. And the intention is that the counties will eventually pick up this cellular cost over time. But for this particular cycle, for the 24 cycle, we have to get them used to it and have to get the counties time to budget for that because this is a new thing we've introduced. So this would be a one-time spend for us to do, but after 24, the counties would have to do it. That is the intention right now. Again, we've talked about the two nursing analysts would be very helpful. We were looking at some of those numbers, and when we came into office, we had 181,000 nurses that were licensed when we came in at the end of 2018, beginning of 2019. We are now at 66,400 more. So we've had a 36% increase in nurses that we've gotten in this state. Despite all the cries of nursing shortages, which we still have, we need more bodies to move those licenses forward. We have burned through the backlog, but I am burning through employees. As always, I will do, as a secretary, I'll quote him, our annual ask for increased investigators because we have increased our overall licenses by 19%. So that means we have that many more licensees and locations to investigate with fewer investigators than we had when we got here. Part of that is our own fault because during the COVID time, we had 2 open investigation spots, and frankly, it was easier just to eliminate those positions than go fire somebody else. We would like to at least have those back. We would like to have 4 more. And there's one specific ask for our athletic commission, colloquially known as the boxing commission. We have 1 employee there. He's getting run ragged. He's been 1 employee for 4 years. We're increasing the number of shows we're getting. This is something that does pay for itself every couple of years. At least every 2 years, we have one big show here that pays the state directly $250,000 through gate fees and pay-per-view taxes. So it is something that literally corporations and PLB and securities all produce a lot of money for the state at a low cost. So these are the kind of things we need to keep it going, especially the $2.8 million for the corporations. So with that, I stand for any of y'all's questions. And again, one more thing, sorry. Secretary wishes he could be here. He's on a plane coming from Connecticut somewhere right now, so.
I'll start with, if we go back to the Verizon data,
Yes, sir.
and we make a one-time purchase of this 550,000. What happens if the counties don't pick it up? Also, have you seen any pushback from any of the counties, maybe some of the smaller rural counties that, aren't necessarily as well funded? Just want to see if we're creating any issues there.
So far, not yet, but the intention is that we would probably make it a rule that if you are using the state system, you have to have the data plan. Just the same way we say you have to use security paper. That's by rule and by law. We would force them to do some of those things. And it's not that expensive, actually. It's $550,000, and that's for 3 election cycles. For each individual unit, is $67 for each of the locations. So it's not an overwhelming cost when you divide it over literally 2,600 locations.
Thank you. Representative Chairman Parsons.
Thank you, Chairman. Appreciate you being here. You went over quite a few things, so I'm sure I didn't catch everything, but you had mentioned, if I understood this correctly, the business licensing system that needs to be replaced. Now, is that something you're asking for, or already in here in the governor's budget, or not in it at all?
It's not in it at all. We are asking for it, and we continue to ask for it. We asked for it in the initial presentation we had this year. It's one of those things, too, that the budget process this year was a little different than normal. We didn't have an agency meeting with the governor's team directly. We had some discussions with OPB, and then they never really asked our asks. So
Yeah.
that's
Well,
kind
much
of how
would
we
that-
got here. $2.8 million.
2.8 million. I did want to ask you, I know these things age quickly, 2.8 million, but I was just wondering how aged is that system?
It's about 8 years.
8 years, okay. Thank you.
And it was funny, I was talking to our corporations director about this process, and she's like, well, we just changed it 7 years ago. I mean, so it's like,
Yeah.
this is, the life cycle on these things is getting faster.
Right.
But one of the things that we're attempting to do is to make these things sort of age-proof and future-proof by going to vendors that are going to be stable. Salesforce is a large Georgia employer. They're a large corporation. And one of the things we've seen in the past is these custom build-outs become very expensive to upkeep, and they fall apart over time. So we're trying to find things that aren't custom build-outs. We're doing clicks, not code.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Yes, sir.
Chairman Prince.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good. Yeah, you mentioned investigations and increasing that. Does any of that have to do, or will it help with elections or anything, that any of those investigators, or we're pretty good right there?
We are never pretty good right there. With the sheer volume of what we've seen over the last few years, what happens is we have a pool, we have 24 positions. 2 of them are the chief and deputy chief, and we have 2 supervisors, and then we have the other 20 investigation positions, of which I think 2 we have open right now. Mm-hmm. They have to investigate everything. By law, there's 2 that are specifically applied to nursing and 2 that are specifically applied to elections. Everybody else does everything else. Whatever. That includes going from architecture investigations to nursing investigations to elections investigations. So during election time, we have sort of a surge capacity where we kind of throw everybody at it, but that means that everybody else gets put back. So the length of our investigations increases, which means that when someone makes a complaint, instead of being done in 70 days, it's going to get done in 110 days because of our shortage of investigators.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Going back to the professional engineers and land surveyors,
Yes, sir.
outside of the 185, do you expect, what other impacts do you expect to PLB?
Not a lot, as they were a small percentage of our overall number of licensees, and they almost had no investigations that they did. And it was an interesting thing to me. They always complained, well, y'all don't investigate anything. I said, we haven't had any references for complaints in 2 years, so how are we supposed to investigate anything? But they said it's a chicken and the egg. So, well, y'all never investigated before. I'm like, well, I can't help that if that's what you believe. So the overall impacts ought not be that great. It does take away a certain number of licensees. I will have to do some rejiggering of the trades probably, which we are going to be doing anyway as we are replacing that system. we're going to get some, we've already knocked out a lot of our backlog. We had a backlog a year and a half ago of something like, I don't want to say these numbers wrong, but I'll give you a scale of it and I'll get you the details of it. Around 60,000 that were over a year, and we've got that down now to 6,000. So we've been really knocking out these, what they call zombie applications. When I became interim director of licensing in January of 2021, which I still am today because we can't get anybody to take the job yet, I instituted, per the Secretary's instructions, a rule that if you didn't fix a deficiency within 60 days of notification, you would consider that application administratively withdrawn. That has cleaned up the behavior of applicants and allowed our licensee or our analysts to work with licensees who are getting the job done so we can get them licensed. One of our big things was our metric, our only metric is, are we licensing people to go do the work they want to do? That is the only metric we use.
I don't see any questions, but I'm going to make one statement.
Yes, sir.
For anybody in the audience that has a business. This is the time of year that people will be going to the Secretary of State's website to renew their corporations. I carried a bill, I think it was last year, maybe the year before that. We get these junk mail. They try to charge you to do it. I appreciate streamlining. You can actually do it for 3 years now at a time, not just 1 year. So maybe some of this junk mail will stop. So I appreciate that change in the corporation registrations. But
And the Secretary would not let it go by, but that was his bill that moved it to 3 years. And his original bill said the Secretary shall make that 3-year potential. The legislature, in their wisdom, said may. And of course, when he was like Secretary of State, the very first thing he ordered us to do was to put that 3-year option in.
well, I'm glad I could tee that up for you.
Thank you, Chairman.
Hope your commute home tonight is a little bit easier. I appreciate you being here. Seeing no more questions. Committee will be meeting again on Monday afternoon and taking up the rest of these agencies as well as some other items. We'll look for an agenda as it comes out today. Thank you, Mr. Hartman. We stand adjourned.
Thank you all very much.